Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you all about the latest from Skeletal Remains, the Entombment of Chaos, out September 11th on Century Media Records. This album has 11 tracks, 48 minutes in length, and this the band's 4 full-length studio album. If you came to this review hoping to hear about how brutal, how heavy this album is, you're not going to be disappointed, because that's exactly what I'm going to tell you. This album is very heavy and very brutal, and I didn't think it would be possible for them to turn the knob to 11 and make their sound even more robust. But I felt that on this album, they really worked out some details. They had some additions to the way they created their songs, and overall the result is a more substantially sounding record. Now, as you get into the album, I think it's obvious that there are two main elements that really drive everything else that's happening on the album, and that is the structure and the sound. As far as structure goes, I really like what they did here. They created an album that starts off with an intro track called Chasm, and then there's an interlude track at the midway point of the album called Enshrined and Agony. So you can look at that interlude track as an interlude track, because that's what it's there for, but you can also look at it as the intro track to the second half of the album, because from a structural perspective, the record is broken into two separate sides, side A and side B, each one of them having their own intro track, if you will, but each one of them carrying the same substance, the same heaviness, the same brutality. So it's an album that doesn't give you a different look in side A that it does in side B. The two are pretty much a mirror of each other. They're just broken down by the overall structure of adding an intro track and then an interlude in the middle, which I really enjoyed, because specifically with the interlude, with Enshrined and Agony, I thought this track was just pure genius. Very melodic, instrumental track, very short, but it breaks the album. It gives you the start of side B, if you will. And considering how brutal that side A is, the opening of the album is, you really need something to just allow you to catch your breath. You just need to go up for air, because you feel like you're drowning in heaviness and brutality and aggression. So I like the construction of the album, I like the structure of the album, really intelligent for a record that's this relentless, top to bottom, where there's not much deviation from structure of songs or individual song structure, overall song structure, or sound approach, very similar from track to track. You really need something that breaks the record. You really need something that allows the listener to reset itself and get ready for the onslaught that comes down the road. If you don't have that interlude, if you don't have that break, you could do it like they did with an interlude, you can do it with a shorter intro track, even though, like I said, this interlude kind of works as an intro track. You could do it in many different ways, but I like this approach because it doesn't take anything away from the overall feel, from the overall substance that the album has to offer from a structural and sound perspective, so it keeps everything very cohesive and very well balanced. Even though it breaks the album into two parts, both parts are really equal to each other. So I like the approach that they took as far as the overall structure of this album is concerned, and definitely having Enshrined and Agony stuck in the middle there was definitely a bonus, was definitely a plus for the overall playability, for the fluidity of the record, for the dynamic mechanisms that this album has, because like I said, it's a very relentless record and you really need a break somewhere in the middle of it in order for the listener to just really regain its composure. Now, as far as sound is concerned, this perhaps is the main element. I mean, these two are the key elements, but I found that the overall sound on this record is really interesting. You could really feel like they took a different approach as far as the overall sound is concerned. The album has a lot thicker volume all over. Some songs more than others, but overall this is a much thicker sounding record than the previous 3 albums. I still felt that there was some songs that felt a little bit thinner, but overall the amount of volume, the amount of heaviness that it's coming at you is just outstanding. It really shows a different side of the band, and it really shows that you can increase heaviness by increasing volume. Now, within the sound itself, you have to really break it into the drums and guitars, because I really love the work that they did on both ends. The drums on this album are just phenomenal. I love the heaviness that they have. I love the brutality that they have. They really give consistency to the sound. They became the foundation almost on every single track. They are the foundation of the heaviness that everything else is built upon. Without the drums being this consistent on every single track, I don't think you can have an album that is this cohesive from top to bottom. So the drum work on this record is outstanding. Very heavy, very driven, but still understanding the different mechanisms within the tracks when you need to pull back ever so slightly, let something else move into the forefront. But when you look at the overall body of work that this record has to offer as far as drums are concerned, it's just phenomenal. Really heavy and really, like I said, the foundation of everything else. Now, from the guitar side, you have some tracks where the guitar sound is a lot more driven, more penetrating. And then you have some tracks where you feel the thickness in the sound. It just takes all the air out of your lungs. It's just pure adrenaline, pure heaviness coming at you, mixed in with the drums, partying up in perfection, really creating a 1-2 punch of heaviness and really expanding the walls of sound, really expanding the boundaries of the record and of the tracks themselves. I like the fact that they didn't go with that approach on every single song. I believe it would become a little bit repetitive. You would start to feel, or at least to get a feeling for what's coming next, and you never want that in a record. You always want to be surprised in terms of what's coming around the corner. So they didn't take that approach on every single song on the album. There's some songs where the guitars have a more layered approach, a more penetrating, thin, driving sound to them. But overall, when you listen to the record, the overall picture in your mind, the overall sensation that you get is that this record, from a guitar's perspective, is definitely a lot bigger. It definitely has a lot more to it. And that, in my opinion, really works well for the overall soundscape that they created for this record. Overall, this is an album that really pushes the envelope a little bit. It really moves the needle as far as the band is concerned. You really see what they've created up until this point, and they are willing to push things forward. They're willing to change ever so slightly, not really touching too much on the DNA of the band in terms of who they are and what they're trying to create. But within the boundaries of their genre and within the boundaries of the sound, the fingerprint sound that they've created for themselves, what can they do in order to change things, in order to create a record that feels fresh, that feels new, and not just something that's been rehashed from the previous 3 albums. So I really feel like they've done that with this record, and perhaps the guitars play a huge role in why I feel that way about the way this album sounds. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I want to start off with Synthetic Impulse. Relentless from the opening. Just from the moment it starts, you feel like there's this barrage of sound, there's this sound wave hitting you in the face. The drums provide, once again, great foundation. It's true of this song, and it's true on almost every single track on this album. It really gives that heaviness, that first layer of heaviness as far as this song is concerned. It stays very consistent. The drums stay very consistent across the whole track. The guitars offer more of a blend of a driving sound with a more thicker sound. It just really fluctuates depending on which moment of the song you're in. The guitars will vary in approach, and I think that adds a nice fluidity to the track, and it definitely adds some dynamics to the song, which is needed. The vocals become almost the equivalent of the guitars. They don't have a one-size-fits-all from the beginning of the track to the end. They vary ever so slightly. Sometimes more driving, sometimes more penetrating in the tone, sometimes a little bit more robust, a little bit thicker, with a little bit of a bigger wall of sound. This track also has my favorite solo on this whole record. I love the solo, I love the length of the solo, I love how it sounds, and how much energy it adds to the overall track. Next, Dissectasy. This is a really interesting track. It has a heavier, deeper sound. It doesn't have this more superficial driving force. It feels like it's dragged down. It feels like it's a song that's coming from deep inside. The drums lay the path. They lay the road that the guitars then complement. The guitars come on top of it, and they just complement each other. A track that really blends very well the drums with the guitars together to create just one unified sound source. And I love how the drums sound overall on this track. They are my favorite element of this song. I just love the sound that they have, the power that they have, the heaviness that they have. The vocals become the perfect outlet for all of those other elements. They really become the beacon, the way to exteriorize everything else that is happening from a musical perspective, having a very vibrant outlook to it and an approach as well. This track has 2 solos. I like that feel. I thought that in the beginning perhaps they were just going to go with one solo, but I like the change. Once again, you have to understand the dynamics of the songs, but you also have to understand in the overall picture of the album that you have to throw some different things at the listener so that the songs don't become repetitive. Adding 2 solos on this song really did that, because it extended the track. It gave it a little bit of an old school death metal feel to it, not as much of a modern touch, more of an old school feel. And that played well with the overall structure of the song, with the overall feel and mood and sound that this track had. So I love how everything came together. Last but not least, Torturous Ways to Obliteration. one of my favorite tracks, if not my favorite track on the album. The opening riff is like the first shot, and then comes the drums, and the drums is just a bazooka that just hits you and demolishes everything in its path. The vocals come in and they merge themselves with those two elements, with the guitars and the drums, and you just feel like it's becoming this onslaught that's just never gonna have an end in sight. It really completes the overall sound, and really it really exposes how good the overall structure of this track is, because it is allowing these three different elements to come together, merge themselves, and create its own unique soundscape, its own unique approach, its own unique characteristics. And I love how that happens on this song. Really driven, really heavy track, sick riffs. I love the guitar playing on this track. Overall, just really outstanding. I felt that they took a few more chances with this track. They tried a few more things. They added a little bit more melody to the way the riffs are put together on this song, but still keeping them heavy, still chugging them along. Overall, by doing that, you add a lot of power, a lot of grooviness, but still keeping one straight direction to the way the song flows, and I love it. My favorite track on the album. This is it, guys. Skeletal remains the embodiment of chaos. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.